You're nothing but a technological dinosaur, Michael. Honestly, I'm surprised you can even operate a smartphone. The entire room erupted in laughter as Brad Thompson, my wife Jennifer's 38-year-old hotshot boss, slapped me on the back like we were old drinking buddies. My face burned with humiliation as I stood there, a 56-year-old former senior engineer, reduced to being the butt of a joke at yet another pretentious Wall Street corporate party. Jennifer squeezed my hand under the table, our secret signal that meant, ignore him, it's not worth it. But something in me snapped that night. 28 years building complex engineering systems for aerospace applications, and this Harvard MBA kid who made his fortune shuffling digital money thought I was obsolete. I smiled tightly, raised my glass of overpriced champagne that tasted like carbonated battery acid and said, "Well, Brad, some dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years. I think I've got a few good ones left in me." More polite laughter. Brad's girlfriend, at least 15 years his junior, giggled and whispered something in his ear. He smirked and nodded. "Sure, Michael. Just don't go extinct on us before Jennifer's performance review next quarter." He winked at my wife, whose smile remained professionally fixed despite the barely concealed threat. That was 6 months ago, the night after Westmoreland Tech let me go along with 300 other engineers over 50. Restructuring, they called it. What they meant was too expensive, too old, too resistant to the Silicon Valley work culture we're trying to emulate. I've been working as a part-time technical consultant since then, making about a third of my former salary while watching our savings slowly drain away. Jennifer still had her job at Thomson Financial Innovations, where she'd worked for the past 5 years. Brad had personally recruited her from a competitor, recognizing her talent for relationship management with high net worth clients. She was good, damn good at what she did. But Brad never let her forget that he was the one who discovered her, like she was some kind of financial prodigy he'd plucked from obscurity instead of an experienced professional with 15 years in the industry. "You shouldn't let him get to you," Jennifer said later that night as we drove home in our aging Volvo, the contrast to Brad's gleaming Tesla particularly stark. "He's insecure. He knows the board is breathing down his neck about quarterly results." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "That doesn't give him the right to humiliate me in front of your entire department." "I know, honey, but he's my boss. What do you want me to do with him?" "Tell him off and lose her job? We can't afford that right now." She was right, of course. With my sudden career implosion, her salary was keeping our mortgage paid and our daughter Amy's college tuition checks from bouncing. The last thing I wanted was for Jennifer to jeopardize her position because her husband couldn't handle a little public ribbing. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Jennifer slept beside me, I realized something. Brad Thompson wasn't entirely wrong. The technological landscape had shifted dramatically in the past 5 years, and I had been too comfortable, too complacent in my expertise. The layoff hadn't just been about age or salary, it had been about relevance. The next morning I made a decision. I wasn't going to fade away into obsolescence or retire into obscurity. I was going to prove Brad Thompson wrong, not with angry words or petty gestures, but by reinventing myself so thoroughly that he would be forced to acknowledge his mistake. I started small. I signed up for online courses in Python, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. I joined coding forums and discussion groups where most members were younger than my daughter. I spent hours every day absorbing new programming languages and frameworks, my engineering background giving me a structural advantage in understanding complex systems even as I struggled with the breakneck pace of technological evolution. "You're up early again," Jennifer commented one morning, finding me hunched over my laptop at 5:30 a.m., 3 empty coffee mugs scattered around me. "Just catching up on some work," I said vaguely, minimizing the window where I was debugging a neural network I'd been building. "Consulting picking up?" she asked hopefully. "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to get into details. Jennifer had enough stress at work without worrying about my increasingly obsessive self-education project. Weeks turned into months. I cut back on consulting to focus on what I now considered my real work. Our savings dwindled further, and Jennifer's concerned glances became more frequent, though she never directly confronted me about it. I started sleeping 4 hours a night, sometimes less. My diet consisted mainly of coffee energy drinks, and whatever leftovers Jennifer placed in front of me during my coding marathons. It wasn't healthy and it wasn't sustainable, but it was necessary because slowly, painstakingly, I was building something that could change everything. The truth was, this journey was far harder than I let on. There were nights I wanted to quit, moments of crushing self-doubt where I wondered if Brad was right. The learning curve was brutal. My aging eyes strained at the screen until blurry code haunted my dreams. My back ached from hunching over the laptop. Sometimes I'd spend 8 hours tracking down a single bug, only to find I'd misplaced a semicolon or bracket. Each night as I struggled with concepts that seemed to come naturally to programmers half my age, Brad's mocking voice echoed in my head. Technological dinosaur. The phrase became both my torment and my fuel. In my darkest moments, usually around 3 a.m., when the code blurred before my exhausted eyes, I'd whisper to myself, dinosaurs ruled the earth for 165 million years. I just need to rule it for one more day. One particularly brutal night, after 14 straight hours of coding and debugging, I hit a wall that seemed insurmountable. My algorithm kept producing nonsensical results no matter how I tweaked it. I slammed my laptop shut and buried my face in my hands. Maybe I am too old for this, I muttered to the empty room. Maybe I should just accept it and move on. I felt a hand on my shoulder and looked up to see Jennifer standing there in her bathrobe, eyes soft with concern. Accept what? That you're too old to learn? Too old to create something amazing? She sat down beside me. The Michael Carter I married never accepted arbitrary limitations. He certainly never let other people define what he was capable of. She opened my laptop and pointed to my notes. I don't understand half of what you're writing here, but I know it matters to you, and I know that if anyone can figure it out, it's you. I took a deep breath, looking at the woman who had believed in me for 30 years. I don't want to let you down, I admitted. The only way you could let me down is by giving up because some finance bro with half your intellect and none of your integrity made you doubt yourself. She kissed my forehead. Now tell me what's not working, and let's see if explaining it helps you figure it out. Somehow talking through the problem with Jennifer, who freely admitted she didn't understand the technical details, helped me see the solution. By sunrise, I'd fixed the bug and made a breakthrough in how the algorithm processed nonlinear relationships between seemingly unrelated data points. Michael, we need to talk, Jennifer said one night in April, sitting across from me at our kitchen table. The lines of worry around her eyes had deepened over the past months. The credit card is maxed out. Amy called, asking if we could help with her summer housing, and I had to tell her we couldn't. Whatever you're doing, I'm close, I interrupted, the desperation in my voice surprising even me. I'm so close, Jen. I just need a little more time. She studied my face, searching for something, reassurance perhaps, or signs of delusion. Close to what? You barely talk to me anymore. You're in front of that computer 18 hours a day. I'm worried about you. I took her hands in mine. They were warm, solid, a reminder of the real world beyond my digital obsession. I can't explain it all yet, I said, but I'm building something important, something that could change everything for us. I just need you to trust me a little longer. She squeezed my hands, her eyes glistening. 2 more weeks, she said finally. Then we need a new plan because this, whatever this is killing you. I nodded, knowing she was right. I was running on fumes, sustained only by obsession and spite. But I was also on the verge of something extraordinary. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday at 3:17 a.m., almost 4 months after Brad's humiliating jab. I'd been working on an algorithm that could predict market fluctuations by analyzing patterns that conventional financial models missed. My background in complex aerospace systems gave me a unique perspective on pattern recognition across seemingly unrelated data points. What I created wasn't just another trading algorithm, it was a fundamentally new approach to financial analysis that incorporated elements from fields as diverse as weather prediction, population migration patterns, and social media sentiment analysis. I named it ATLAS, Adaptive Temporal Learning and Analysis System. When I ran the first comprehensive test against 5 years of historical market data, I actually shouted out loud, startling Jennifer awake. What? What happened? She mumbled, sitting up in bed. Nothing, I said quickly. Sorry, just solved a problem I've been working on. The results were better than I dared hope. Atlas had predicted major market movements with 87% accuracy, nearly 30% better than the industry-leading algorithms currently in use. If deployed in an actual trading environment, it could potentially generate billions in revenue while minimizing risk exposure. I had created something valuable, extremely valuable, but I needed to be strategic about what to do next. The following week, I reached out to an old colleague, David Chen, who had left Westmoreland Tech years ago to join a venture capital firm specializing in fintech. We'd always gotten along well, and he'd been genuinely outraged when he heard about my layoff. Michael, it's been too long, David said warmly when we met for lunch at a quiet bistro downtown. At 62, he was one of the few people in the tech investment world who didn't make me feel ancient. How's life as a consultant treating you? Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, I replied, sliding a tablet across the table. I've been working on something I think you might find interesting. David adjusted his glasses and began scrolling through the technical documentation I'd prepared. His expression shifted from polite interest to focused concentration, then to thinly veiled excitement. This is impressive, he said finally, looking up. You developed this yourself? Since the layoff? I nodded. I've had a lot of free time. Michael, if these results are accurate, they are. I've triple-checked everything. Run it against multiple data sets. It works, David. He leaned back, studying me with new eyes. You know what this is worth, right? I have an idea, but I need partners, not buyers. And I need someone who understands both the technology and the financial world. David's smile spread slowly across his face. Well, it just so happens that's exactly what my firm specializes in. Let me make some calls. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a sleek conference room on the 47th floor of a midtown skyscraper, presenting Atlas to a panel of David's colleagues at Meridian Ventures. These weren't just any venture capitalists. They were former quants, data scientists, and financial analysts who had moved to the investment side of the equation. They asked brutal, incisive questions, probing for weaknesses in my methodology and assumptions. I answered every question calmly and confidently, drawing on decades of experience defending engineering designs in high-stakes environments. By the end of the 3-hour session, the atmosphere in the room had changed from skeptical evaluation to collaborative excitement. We'd like to move forward, said Sarah Williams, Meridian's managing partner, a formidable woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair and piercing eyes. David has advocated strongly for both you and your technology, and we agree with his assessment. We're prepared to offer $10 million in initial funding for 25% equity, with you remaining as CEO and technical lead. I kept my expression neutral, despite the adrenaline surge those words triggered. I appreciate the offer, but I'm thinking of a different structure. I'd prefer to establish a partnership where Meridian provides not just funding, but strategic connections in the financial sector. I'm interested in licensing Atlas rather than selling it outright to any single institution. Sarah raised an eyebrow, exchanging glances with her colleagues. That's not our usual model. This isn't your usual investment opportunity. I saw him, and I replied evenly. Atlas isn't just another trading algorithm. It's a fundamental reimagining of how financial data can be processed and interpreted. Its value increases exponentially with wider adoption across different sectors of the market. The negotiations continued for several more meetings, but eventually we reached an agreement. Meridian would provide $15 million in funding for 30% equity, with aggressive targets for licensing the technology to their extensive network of financial institutions. I would remain CEO and retain control of the technology's development pathway. Within a month, Atlas Financial Intelligence was officially incorporated, with offices in a modest but respectable building in the financial district. I hired a small team of brilliant programmers and data scientists, some young prodigies, others experienced professionals who, like me, had been pushed aside by the industry's obsession with youth. My first hire was Eleanor Wright, a 58-year-old former CTO who'd been early retired from a major tech firm. Her extensive experience in building secure, scalable financial systems was exactly what we needed. Next came James Patel, 62, whose background in quantum computing gave us insights that most fintech startups couldn't touch. I rounded out the senior team with Maria Gonzalez, 54, a data scientist whose work on predictive analytics had been groundbreaking but overlooked because she wasn't a cultural fit at her previous company. "You've assembled quite the team of dinosaurs," Eleanor joked during our first full staff meeting. "Experienced apex predators," I corrected with a smile. "And we're going to show Wall Street exactly what we can do." The younger members of our team, brilliant programmers and analysts in their 20s and 30s, brought cutting-edge skills and fresh perspectives. But unlike most tech companies, we didn't worship youth at the expense of experience. We created a genuinely collaborative environment where everyone's contributions were valued. The first time we demonstrated Atlas to a potential client, a managing director at Goldman Sachs with a reputation for skepticism toward new technologies, remains one of the most satisfying moments of my career. "So you're claiming this system can predict market movements with significantly higher accuracy than our current models?" he asked, not bothering to hide his doubt. "Based on what proprietary insight exactly?" I smiled. "Not proprietary insight, interdisciplinary perspective. Financial markets don't exist in isolation. They're affected by countless variables that traditional models either ignore or treat as anomalies." "That's a nice theory," he said dismissively, "but I've heard similar claims from a dozen startups this year alone." Instead of arguing, I pulled up a dashboard showing Atlas's predictions for various market sectors over the previous 6 months, compared to actual performance. As the graphs and figures populated the screen, the managing director's expression shifted from bored skepticism to intense focus. "These are actual results?" he asked, leaning forward. "Not back-tested simulations?" "Actual results," I confirmed. "We've been running live predictions in parallel with real markets for validation purposes." He studied the data for several long minutes. "I've never seen accuracy like this across such diverse market conditions," he admitted finally. "What's your secret?" 30 years of engineering experience applied to a new domain," I replied. "Sometimes fresh eyes aren't young eyes. They're experienced eyes looking at a new problem." 2 weeks later, Goldman Sachs signed our first major licensing agreement, worth $30 million. More deals followed rapidly: JP Morgan Chase, Citadel, BlackRock. Each successful implementation further validated our technology and attracted more attention in the financial world. What truly set Atlas apart was its performance during unexpected market events. When a surprise Federal Reserve announcement sent markets into temporary chaos, systems running our algorithm adjusted smoothly, minimizing losses and even identifying profitable opportunities amid the disruption. Word spread quickly through the industry. This wasn't just an incremental improvement on existing technology, it was a game changer. The financial press began taking notice. Bloomberg ran a feature on the AI revolution reshaping Wall Street, highlighting Atlas as the leading edge of a new paradigm in financial analysis. CNBC invited our head of market strategy, not me, I was still staying deliberately behind the scenes, to discuss how artificial intelligence was transforming investment decisions. Jennifer was shocked when I finally revealed what I'd been working on all those months. "You started a company? Without telling me?" Her voice wavered between amazement and hurt. "I didn't want to get your hopes up until I was sure it would work," I explained. "And I didn't want to put you in an awkward position with Brad." Her eyes widened. "Brad? What does he have to do with this?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "Let's just say his comments at that party were motivational." Jennifer shook her head slowly. "So all this time, while I've been worried sick about our finances and your mental health, you've been secretly building a multi-million-dollar company to prove a point to my boss?" When she put it that way, it did sound somewhat ridiculous. "Not just to prove a point," I said defensively, "to create something valuable, to reinvent myself, to make sure we'll be okay financially." "And to stick it to Brad," she added, a reluctant smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. I couldn't help but grin back. "Well, that's definitely a bonus." Our relationship transformed as Atlas Financial Intelligence grew. The secretive, obsessive husband who had worried Jennifer for months was replaced by a passionate, energized version of the man she'd married. We talked for hours about the company's vision, about how to create a workplace that valued people at all stages of their careers. She became my sounding board, my reality check, and occasionally my conscience when my desire for vindication threatened to overshadow the larger mission. Don't make this just about Brad, she reminded me more than once. What you're building is too important for that. She was right, of course. Atlas was about far more than proving a point to one arrogant executive. It was about challenging an entire industry's assumptions about innovation, experience, and value. But I'd be lying if I said the prospect of Brad's eventual comeuppance didn't add a certain sweetness to our success. Jennifer became our secret weapon. While maintaining perfect professionalism at work, she began subtly gathering intelligence about Thomson Financial's weaknesses, client dissatisfactions, and strategic blind spots. She never compromised her ethics or shared proprietary information, but her insights helped us understand exactly where Atlas could make the biggest impact. Brad's entire strategy is built around high-frequency trading systems that are already becoming outdated, she told me one evening. They're ignoring the longer-term predictive models that could stabilize client portfolios during market volatility. That's exactly where Atlas excels, I said, making notes. We can position ourselves as the solution to problems their clients don't even realize they have yet. I was careful to stay out of the spotlight personally, letting our results speak for themselves. Jennifer and I agreed it was better if Brad remained unaware of my connection to Atlas Financial Intelligence, at least for the time being. She reported that Thomson Financial was starting to feel the competitive pressure as clients began asking why their analytical tools weren't producing results comparable to what competitors were achieving with our system. Brad's been on the warpath, Jennifer told me one evening. He called an emergency meeting of all department heads today. Apparently, 3 major clients have moved significant portions of their portfolios to Goldman in the past month. Any mention of Atlas? I asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than gleeful. Not by name, but he's demanding to know what secret weapon Goldman and the others are using. He's convinced there's some kind of industrial espionage happening. She shook her head. It's getting ugly. He's threatening performance reviews for anyone who leaks information to competitors. That sounds legally questionable, I frowned. It's just Brad being Brad. He's terrified of losing his golden boy status with the board. Jennifer sighed. I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. The panic at Thomson Financial escalated as their quarterly results showed alarming trends. Not only were they losing clients to firms using Atlas, but their own trading algorithms were underperforming against the market. Brad held daily crisis meetings, bringing in expensive consultants who offered contradictory advice and temporary fixes. He fired 2 analysts yesterday for suggesting they explore partnerships with external AI companies, Jennifer reported. He called them disloyal for implying that our in-house technology wasn't good enough. Classic innovator's dilemma, I said. He's so invested in defending the old way that he can't see the new reality. The inevitable confrontation came sooner than I expected. Thomson Financial Innovations Board of Directors, increasingly concerned about client defections and lagging performance, hired a consulting firm to evaluate emerging technologies that might help them regain their competitive edge. The consultant's recommendation was unequivocal. License Atlas from Atlas Financial Intelligence immediately. Brad had no choice but to reach out. His assistant called our office to schedule a meeting with whatever technical person is available to discuss licensing options. I had our COO, Teresa Martinez, handle the initial meeting, deliberately staying in the background. Teresa reported back with undisguised amusement. He's desperate, she said, trying to play it cool, but I could tell he's under enormous pressure. He's offering well above our standard rate, wanting immediate implementation. Did you accept? I asked. I told him we'd need to discuss it with our CEO, as we're very selective about our clients, and partnership culture is important to us. Teresa's grin was wicked. He nearly had an aneurysm trying to maintain his composure. The stage was set. I scheduled the follow-up meeting for the following week at our offices. Jennifer took the day off work to be there. There was no way she was missing this. Brad arrived 15 minutes early, accompanied by Thomson Financial's CTO, a nervous-looking man named Paul Roberts. They were shown to our conference room, where Teresa entertained them with pleasant small talk while they waited. I watched through the one-way glass of my office, savoring the moment. Ready? Jennifer asked, squeezing my hand. As I'll ever be, I replied. I replied, straightening my tie. We entered the conference room together. Brad was mid-sentence, explaining to Teresa why Thompson Financial deserved priority implementation of our system. He glanced up casually as the door opened, then did a comical double-take when he saw us. Jennifer? He blurted, confusion washing over his face. Then his eyes locked onto me, and the confusion deepened. Michael, what are you doing here? I smiled pleasantly as I took my seat at the head of the table. Mr. Thompson, welcome to Atlas Financial Intelligence. I believe you've met my COO, Teresa, and of course you know my wife, Jennifer, who's been kind enough to take a day off to join us for this meeting. Brad's face cycled through emotions, confusion, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally barely concealed horror. You're involved with Atlas? Michael is the founder and CEO, Teresa supplied helpfully. He developed the core technology himself. Paul, the CTO, was looking back and forth between us with growing interest. You're the creator of Atlas? The actual algorithm designer? I nodded. That's correct. That's remarkable work, Paul said, professional admiration temporarily overriding the awkwardness of the situation. The pattern recognition capabilities are unlike anything I've seen before. How did you conceptualize the multi-layered analysis framework? It's actually an adaptation of systems I designed for predictive maintenance in aerospace applications, I explained. The principles of detecting subtle pattern changes before catastrophic failure translate surprisingly well to market movements. Brad cleared his throat loudly, attempting to regain control of the conversation. Well, this is unexpected, but ultimately irrelevant to our business discussion today. Thompson Financial is prepared to offer... Mr. Thompson, I interrupted gently. Before we discuss terms, I think it's important that we address the question of partnership compatibility. At Atlas, we're very selective about who we work with. Our technology is powerful, and we want to ensure it's deployed in environments where it will be properly utilized and appreciated. Brad's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating explicitly that we value mutual respect, recognition of expertise regardless of age or background, and a collaborative approach to problem solving. I maintained eye contact with him. We've had concerns about Thompson Financial's corporate culture in these areas. Jennifer suppressed a smile as Brad's face reddened. Paul, the CTO, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Our corporate culture is none of your concern, Brad snapped. We're here to discuss a technology licensing agreement, not exchange management philosophies. Actually, Mr. Thompson, Teresa interjected smoothly, partnership culture alignment is a standard part of our evaluation process for all potential clients. We've declined several licensing opportunities with organizations where we felt there wasn't a good fit. Brad's professional veneer was cracking. This is absurd. You're letting personal feelings interfere with a business decision that could be worth millions to your company. Personal feelings, I raised an eyebrow. I'm simply being cautious. After all, I wouldn't want to risk becoming, what was the phrase you used, a technological dinosaur whose expertise is obsolete. The blood drained from Brad's face as he realized I was quoting his own words back to him. Paul looked confused. I'm sorry, what's going on here? Nothing that should concern you, Paul, I said kindly. Your technical team is excellent, from what we've seen. In fact, we'd be happy to work with them directly if that's an option. It's not, Brad interjected harshly. That's unfortunate, I sighed, because our other option would be to recommend to your board that Thompson Financial needs different leadership before we can consider a partnership. Leadership that recognizes the value of experience and diverse perspectives. Brad's jaw dropped. Are you threatening me? Not at all. Just sharing our partnership criteria. I understand your board meeting is next week. They're quite concerned about the client exodus, I hear. This is ridiculous, Brad sputtered, standing up abruptly. We're done here. Paul, let's go. The CTO hesitated, looking torn. Brad, maybe we should... Now, Paul? As Brad stormed toward the door, I called after him. Mr. Thompson, just to be clear, we're not rejecting Thompson Financial as a client. We're merely suggesting that certain cultural adjustments might be necessary before we can proceed. I'd be happy to elaborate on these recommendations to your board if that would be helpful. Brad froze with his hand on the doorknob, his back to us. The implied threat was clear. Either he changed his attitude and apologized, or I would make sure his board knew exactly why Thompson Financial was being denied access to the technology that their competitors were using to poach their clients. Slowly, Brad turned around. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage, but when he spoke, his voice was carefully modulated. I may have misjudged certain situations in the past, he said stiffly. Perhaps we could discuss what specific concerns you have about our corporate culture. I think that would be productive, I agreed pleasantly. Why don't you and Paul take a moment to collect yourselves, and we can resume in 15 minutes. After they left the room, Jennifer turned to me with wide eyes. I can't believe you just did that. He looks like he's about to have a stroke. He'll survive, I said. His ego might not, but that's probably for the best. Teresa chuckled. Should I get the board chairman's contact information ready? Just in case? Let's see how the next conversation goes, I replied. But yes, have it on standby. When Brad and Paul returned, the dynamic had shifted palpably. Brad had regained his composure but lost his arrogance. He sat quietly while Paul asked intelligent, technical questions about implementation requirements and timelines. Finally, I addressed the elephant in the room. Mr. Thompson, I'll be direct. My concerns about Thompson Financial's culture stem primarily from my personal interactions with you. Your dismissive attitude toward experience, particularly in technology fields, suggests a short-sightedness that could impact how effectively our system is implemented and utilized at your company. Brad swallowed hard. I may have made some inappropriate comments in social settings. If I've given offense, that wasn't my intention. Intentions aside, the impact was clear, I replied. You publicly dismissed decades of engineering expertise based solely on age, using derogatory terms like dinosaur to imply obsolescence. That kind of attitude is fundamentally incompatible with our partnership philosophy. The room was silent. Jennifer watched Brad with undisguised interest, clearly enjoying his discomfort. I apologize, Brad said finally, the words clearly costing him considerable effort. Those comments were unprofessional and incorrect, as your current success obviously demonstrates. I studied him for a long moment. Apology accepted. However, my concerns extend beyond a single incident. I would need assurances that Thompson Financial values diverse perspectives, including those from professionals with extensive experience. What kind of assurances? Brad asked warily. I propose that as part of our licensing agreement, I would serve as a technical advisor to your board for the first year of implementation. This would ensure the technology is properly integrated and would give me visibility into how your organization functions at a cultural level. Brad's eyes widened as he realized what I was suggesting. I would effectively be overseeing him, reporting directly to his board. That's unusual, he said carefully. So is our technology, I countered. Its proper implementation requires a certain organizational mindset. My advisory role would help ensure that mindset is present or developed. Paul, the CTO, nodded enthusiastically. I think that's an excellent idea. Having the creator of the system available to guide implementation would be invaluable. Brad was trapped, and he knew it. If he refused, I would speak to the board directly. If he agreed, he would be subjecting himself to my oversight and influence. I'm sure we can work something out along those lines, he said finally, his smile tight and forced. Excellent, I replied warmly. Teresa will draw up the paperwork. I look forward to our partnership, Mr. Thompson. As we concluded the meeting and escorted them out, Brad paused at the door. I have to ask, was this your plan all along, from that night at the party? I smiled. Let's just say that sometimes, Mr. Thompson, the dinosaurs have a few tricks left up their sleeves. My first board meeting at Thompson Financial was a masterclass in subtle power dynamics. I arrived early, chatting easily with board members about market trends and the future of AI and finance. By the time Brad entered the room, I was already on a first-name basis with the chairman and several key directors. Michael has been sharing some fascinating insights about how age diversity in technical teams leads to more robust solutions, the chairman commented as Brad took his seat. Something we should consider implementing more broadly. Don't you think, Brad? Brad's smile was tight. Absolutely. In fact, I've been reviewing our hiring practices to ensure we're not overlooking experienced talent. Glad to hear it, I said pleasantly. I've found that the most innovative teams combine the fresh perspectives of youth with the battle-tested wisdom of experience. Several board members nodded approvingly. Brad looked like he was swallowing glass. The transformation at Thomson Financial over the next year was remarkable. My advisory position gave me unprecedented influence, which I wielded like a surgeon's scalpel, precise, effective, and occasionally painful. I insisted on comprehensive diversity training focusing on ageism. I instituted mentorship programs pairing younger employees with experienced professionals, and I made sure Brad attended every single session, sitting front and center. The results spoke for themselves. As the culture shifted, so did performance. Teams with diverse age ranges consistently outperformed homogeneous groups. Several dinosaurs who had been marginalized found their voices again, contributing insights that led to significant innovations. Young hotshots who had previously dominated meetings began listening more and interrupting less, recognizing the value of experience. Brad himself underwent the most remarkable transformation. I watched him evolve from resentful compliance to genuine engagement. During one particularly productive strategy session, he caught me observing him as he earnestly solicited advice from a 60-year-old systems analyst who had previously been ignored. "What?" he asked defensively when our eyes met. "Nothing," I replied, "just noticing some positive changes." He hesitated, then said quietly, "I was wrong about a lot of things, not just about you." The board, seeing the dramatic improvements in client retention and acquisition after implementing Atlas, extended my advisory contract for another year. Brad's performance bonuses were now partially tied to cultural metrics I helped establish. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all him. Under my guidance, Thomson Financial began actively recruiting experienced professionals who had been overlooked or pushed out by other firms. The results were transformative. These dinosaurs, as Brad had once called us, brought decades of insight and stability to the company's operations. Client satisfaction soared, employee retention improved, and the firm's reputation for innovation paradoxically strengthened as they embraced a more balanced approach to technology and experience. At the first anniversary celebration of our partnership, I found Brad alone on the terrace, nursing a scotch and staring out at the skyline. "Quite a view," I said, joining him at the railing. He nodded, not looking at me. "Congratulations on the success of the implementation. The board is very pleased." "Your team did excellent work," I acknowledged, "especially Paul. He has a bright future ahead." Brad took another sip of his drink. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said last year about experience and innovation. I've been wondering if I've been approaching leadership all wrong." "How so?" "I've always equated innovation with youth. Fresh ideas, disruptive thinking, all that startup culture nonsense." He finally turned to face me. "But what you did with Atlas, that required both innovation and experience. You couldn't have created it without both." I studied him, surprised by his candor. "That's an insightful observation." "Don't sound so shocked," he said with a wry smile. "Even dinosaurs can learn new tricks, right?" I laughed despite myself. Perhaps there was hope for Brad Thompson after all. "I was wrong about you, Michael," he admitted, his voice quiet. "And not just professionally. The way I treated you at that party, it was inexcusable." "Why did you do it?" I asked, genuinely curious. Brad stared into his glass. "Fear, probably. I was 38, running a company where most of the board members were in their 60s. Every day I felt like an imposter waiting to be exposed. So I compensated by surrounding myself with people younger than me, people I could feel superior to, and dismissing anyone older." He nodded. "It's embarrassing to admit how insecure I was. Still am sometimes." "Self-awareness is a good first step," I said, offering him an olive branch. "What matters is what you do with it." Jennifer was eventually promoted to head her department after her predecessor left for a competitor. She enjoyed telling me about Brad's awkward attempts to navigate our complex relationship, formal and deferential in board meetings where I was present, studiously professional when dealing with her directly. He actually asked me yesterday if you harbor any ongoing resentment toward him, she told me one evening laughing. I told him you're too busy revolutionizing financial technology to think about him at all. That was cruel, I observed, grinning. Accurate, but cruel. Atlas Financial Intelligence continued to grow beyond my wildest expectations. We expanded into new markets, developed additional applications for our core technology, and eventually went public with a spectacularly successful IPO. I remained CEO for 5 years before stepping into a chairman role, allowing me more time to mentor young engineers and developers who were eager to learn from someone with my unusual career trajectory. On the day of our IPO, as we watched our company's value soar past $2 billion, Jennifer squeezed my hand and whispered, "Not bad for an obsolete dinosaur." The bell at the New York Stock Exchange rang loud and clear that morning, but not as loud as the vindication I felt watching Brad Thompson, now working directly under Jennifer, applauding from the sidelines. His expression was a complex mixture of respect, regret, and resignation, the face of a man who had learned his lesson the hard way. What gave me the most satisfaction, though, wasn't Brad's humbling or even our financial success. It was the impact we'd had on industry culture. Across Wall Street and Silicon Valley, firms were beginning to recognize the value of experience, particularly in developing AI systems where ethical considerations and real-world knowledge were proving as important as technical expertise. The dinosaur narrative was shifting, with older professionals increasingly valued for their perspective and judgment. We'd created a new model, one where innovation wasn't the exclusive domain of youth, but the product of diverse teams spanning generations and backgrounds. Atlas had transformed financial analysis, but our greatest achievement was changing how the industry viewed talent and expertise. 5 years after our IPO, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at Harvard Business School. The subject? Intergenerational innovation, the new paradigm in tech leadership. As I walked onto the stage, I spotted a familiar face in the front row. Brad Thompson, now a guest lecturer on ethical leadership and corporate culture, sat attentively, notebook open, ready to learn. We nodded to each other, a silent acknowledgement of our shared journey. As I began my talk, I realized that our story had come full circle. The dinosaur had not only survived, he had helped reshape the ecosystem. My favorite speaking engagement each year is at a conference for professionals considering career changes after 50. I tell them my story, usually omitting the more personal details about Brad, and remind them that experience isn't obsolete. It just needs to be paired with continuous learning and adaptation. The dinosaurs ruled Earth for 165 million years, I always conclude. Humans have been around for about 300,000. So when someone calls you a dinosaur, just smile and thank them for the compliment. It means you've got staying power. Sometimes I think about that night at the corporate party, about how a casual insult delivered by an arrogant young executive changed the course of my life. If Brad hadn't mocked me so publicly, would I have found the motivation to reinvent myself? Would Atlas ever have been created? I mentioned this to Jennifer on our 30th anniversary as we sat on the terrace of our vacation home overlooking the Pacific. "Maybe you should send him a thank you note," she suggested wryly. I laughed. I think becoming his boss was thanks enough. Jennifer raised her glass. "To dinosaurs with staying power." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to proving that extinction is always optional."